Well, welcome to this session on leveraging AI for climate resilient agriculture. My name is Graham Wright, the Group Managing Director of MSC, MicroSave Consulting. The Climate Resilient Agriculture Working Group of the CFAR Alliance highlights the importance of digital technology in the world's efforts to improve the livelihood and resilience of smallholder farmers. And AI promises to be a key part of this. So I'm really delighted to have a panel of two of the leading AI-enabled technology providers for agriculture, Pratik from Kisan AI and Kunal of Cropin. Now, before we get into the discussion, which is going to be amazing, I'm sure, let's remind ourselves of just how climate change is already affecting the livelihoods of smallholder farmers across the globe. Bear with me and I'll share some slides if I may. So this is from work that we did in Bihar. And you can see that from a decade ago, the trend has been persistently that disruptions, either from heat waves or droughts or flooding, have increased. And similarly, the result has been that farmers are experiencing very significant increases in pest infestations and so on. And we saw this also when we did work with farmers in Bangladesh. The impact of extreme heat and ground that is already saline from previous cyclones means that land preparation is difficult. Then the erratic rainfall first delayed and then dried up seeds, and then the torrential downpours that came with the rain season that was late but then excessive meant that a lot of the seeds were flooded away, and of course the flooding persisted. After the floods came high temperatures, and those diseases and infestations that we saw in Bihar are replicated again in Bangladesh. And then in November, we had Cyclone Amphan, and that wiped out the final standing crop and again washed in the saline water that makes the soil even less fertile. And of course, it makes storage and drying that much more difficult, not to say impossible. So of course, overall profits are significantly reduced, and indeed many of the farmers that we talked to had made significant losses as a consequence. And our work with CGAP and Decodis in Nigeria has shown this at a macro scale. So we looked at the impact of climate change on the 5 livelihood capitals: physical, natural, financial, social, and human. And you can see that in the main, they almost all declined in the last 2 decades as a function of climate change. This reflects the relentless erosion, not just of income, but increasingly of assets of poor and vulnerable communities affected by climate change. Now, in India, we're working with the government of India and the AgriStack and the government of Bihar, integrating the digital farmer services platform to use technology to significantly enhance key aspects of the agricultural production cycle, the financing of it, and indeed the market linkages associated with it, and indeed to help farmers respond to the challenges of climate change. And that's why I thought that it would be so useful to have a conversation with 2 of the leading experts on AI for agriculture. So I'm going to jump straight in and ask, starting with Pratik perhaps, how is AI-enabled technology already helping to respond to these types of challenges? Pratik.
Thank you, Graham. So, like from our experience, what we have seen, the smallholder farmers, the biggest challenge they face is the knowledge gap. Like we know that there's a lot of knowledge being produced for sustainable agriculture and climate resilient agriculture, but they are mostly like, with the institute, like just like this event. But there is no easy way to transfer this knowledge back to the farmer or smallholder farmers who do not have access to this information, and mostly that is because of the literacy and the language barrier. And from our experience, what we have seen, if we enable something with AI, because with the new advancements in the generative AI can actually comprehend the question that is coming from farmer much more better than the previously, from the other solutions. So, and if we implement a solution in their own languages and also enable the voice-based interface, what end up happening is the farmer can ask question to AI in their own language, AI can comprehend it and reply back from the knowledge that has been produced already from this institute. And this kind of bridge the whole knowledge gap between the knowledge producers and the consumers of the knowledge. And with the solution that we have implemented, we have started seeing that farmer asking questions regarding the practices and regarding sustainable agriculture. And we have also seen the back and forth, like with the conversational AI, what is happening is they can actually go back and forth with the AI and have a conversation, which was not possible before. And with the generative AI, we can actually have like the huge knowledge set available to them and kind of exactly find the question they're looking for and deliver that particular solution. And basically what that enables is until now, farmer has to rely on the local expert who may or may not be the expert, and they never had a capability of going to the Google search for solution and comprehending this thing, right? With this one, by delivering language in their, will answer in their own language, with the voice, now we can actually, complete the whole knowledge production to the knowledge consumption cycle. That's what we are seeing right now from the solution that we have built.
Brilliant. And this will come in the next question, but I'm going to be asking you, I think, about what the role of imaging, videos, et cetera, will be in the long-term future. But let's turn quickly to Kunal now, and I want to do a plug for Cropin because he just rocked my world by telling me that they're now in 90 different countries across the globe, which is just a phenomenal achievement. So Kunal, again, to you, how is AI digital technology actually currently helping farmers facing climate change?
Well, thanks, Graham, and you really covered that very well in your presentation. Exactly, from the Cropin context, we have been there in the space for the last 13 years right now. And when we started back in 2010, it was more about digital agriculture, the data of the farms, the farmers, what has to be done was very important to be there at one single place so that the decisions could happen. But eventually, as we started moving towards 2016, 17, we realized that climate was one of the biggest factors which was unknown, because we were knowing that the good agriculture practices has to be shared to the farmers and the farmers will practice that and eventually the come out. But what was happening is because of the changing climatic conditions, there was sudden heat, heat stress, there was certain floods would come, droughts would come, and this will eventually help it will actually impact the crops in very, very different ways. So understanding that hyperlocal context of the climate and giving the advices to the farmer was then the need of the hour. And essentially from 2016, 17 onwards, we started seeing a lot of solutions being asked not only by organizations that we support, but also by the farmers, that how can we really become much more predictive and prescriptive in this particular scenario. So what we started doing is understanding that if we have to really hyperlocal and contextualize the knowledge for that particular farmer, we have to know the science of agriculture and embed with the criteria which could be predicted. And this could be monitored through remote sensing, predicted through climate smart, climate forecasts, understanding the local condition in the particular location and combining that to get into a crop knowledge. And this crop knowledge would not be just a timely information that would be shared, but it will depend on the situation, how the crops are moving. If there is from the time of sowing where we would realize that, okay, in this particular area where mostly our farmers are rain-fed farmers and the rain patterns are changing, we would ask the farmers that this is not the right time for you to do the sowing and potentially wait for some time. And when the right conducive time comes for the farmers, we then advise the farmer to do that particular sowing. But we also realize that at some point in time when the weather has really changed and the the rainy season has actually moved further ahead, we would advise a farmer that you can go for a different crop rather than the traditional crop, which would need much more rainfall. We also have seen, like, in areas which are more stressed, where you will have during the season, you will have more stress from the heat. You would actually advise a farmer that you can go for a high resistance, climate resilient seed, which will be available in that particular market. So helping the farmer to contextualize the crop, because you will have 2 or 3 seasons, but how do you really connect to that particular season and do the best that is possible from the time you are doing the planning? Now, once the plan comes in and becomes active and the farmer would have sown, then the crop has to start growing. You have to think about irrigation. Irrigation for the smaller farmers are becoming a big cost. And if you do not irrigate, and if you irrigate excessively, there's a cost. If you are not able to irrigate, then the stress will be there in that particular farm. And that also is a factor of the crop, when the crop would need that particular irrigation, and the forthcoming weather condition, whether there is a certain rainfall available or there is a high stress because of temperature. You analyze those conditions and say this crop will need this much irrigation at this point in time, and do not over irrigate or under irrigate. So this will help you in terms of optimizing your irrigation when you are practicing, and that when the optimal irrigation is happening to the crop will also give you the maximum output in that manner. And we are seeing these AI-based models, when it becomes much more predictive, is actually also helping you reduce the water consumption, which is a focus of a lot of organizations that we are working with. Then is the pest and disease, eventually, that you also shared. Cropping patterns are changing, heat stresses are changing, humidity is a very important factor for pest and disease. And when we realize that in a certain location for that particular crop, in that particular stage of the crop, the situation is conducive for that pest and disease to attack, which is again a factor of your historical weather over the period of 7 to 10 days, forthcoming weather conditions, and you combine it together with the crop knowledge and say, in this vegetative stage of the crop, this particular pest will come and attack. And then you contextualize that to the particular location and then build that knowledge and provide it to the farmer. So you then are able to predict pests and disease in advance, advise that particular farmer so that he can actually take care of that particular crop much in advance so that the losses is reduced. And eventually moving towards, as you go towards, and even in the pests and disease, if you see, it's not just the farmer which is benefiting from AI. The agrochemical companies, which were traditionally just pushing their products in the market, now they're able to build products, innovate products, put that at the right time so that if there is a need in the market, their products are available to solve that. So we are seeing the industry coming together along with the needs of the farmers to solve that particular problem that might arise. And eventually, moving towards the harvest side, and you rightly said, when we were working in Bihar as well with one of the World Bank funded projects, we realized that at the time of harvesting, there was a strong wind that was forecasted, and the crops were still up there in the fields. We advised the farmers that if you can actually harvest them early, then you will be able to solve a lot of that. Some of the farmers harvested and some of them did not. And then when the farmers realized that no, it was the right advisory could be taken, eventually we saw that the next year onwards, the adoption of our advisories increased. So giving the right context at the right time to the farmer and making them much more advanced in taking decisions it's something that AI can really build at scale. And the second thing is also about how do you basically get the industry together? Because it's not the farmer. The industry is also there in terms of access to finance, access to insurance, efficient supply chain. So if you know about how much is going to come to the market, the supply chain players can come and act together, which essentially also means there is less losses that's happening in the supply chain. Right time of yield estimations can be done. The optimum yield, the optimum production could be estimated, and then the supply chain in terms of transportation, warehousing, and logistics can be planned out. So we see that the system of agriculture, if it combines together with the production system of the farmer, and we try and maximize the per acre value, this essentially can actually help the entire ecosystem to grow. And again, coming back to the point of every single farmer is unique, every single farm is unique, and to look at that particular thing in a very unique manner, digital and AI is a way forward, and that's what we are trying to support as well.
Brilliant, and that's a really good summary. And I'm left thinking, 2 or 3 things as a function of that. I mean, the first obviously is, as you concluded with, the importance of localization, and my team are working with Dr. Pratik, looking at, taking his outstanding voice-enabled systems from India, where he's got 100% coverage, into Bangladesh. You would think with West Bengal, same language should be easy, but of course, the climatic conditions and the local requirements and realities are different in Bangladesh from West Bengal, and so there's some learning and some localization that needs to happen there. And indeed, within Bangladesh, there's a whole series of very different agro-eco systems and zones that, again, have very different requirements. I think the other thing that I find very interesting when listening to this is, that challenge that we hear time and time again about how do we persuade farmers that this very high sophisticated technology is valuable. And as you say, when you have something that is sort of proof of concept for them, that makes a huge, huge difference. One of the things that we've been working on with the Climate Resilient Agriculture Working Group of CFAR is the diffusion of innovation, because there's so much outstanding technology already available out there. But if you look at uptake and usage in Africa, something like 13% of smallholder farmers in Africa, farmers in Africa have logged on to or enrolled in digital technology for agriculture, and only 5% of them are actually using it in any way or form. And that's awful. So that, to me, is one of the big challenges, is how do we overcome that trust barrier and enable smallholder farmers to leverage the outstanding digital technologies that are already out there. So that sort of leads to the next question that I was going to ask you both. And let me turn to Kunal first, and then Pratik, I will come back to you afterwards. We've heard about what AI is already doing. Let's look 5 years, 10 years down the track. How will it have evolved, and what will AI-enabled digital technology be able to do in the near-term future? Let's start with you, Kunal.
So I think it's the hyperlocal precision is a big problem itself to be solved. There are several, like in our platform, we are talking about 10,000 varieties, 500 plus crops that we are monitoring, supporting. But getting to the hyperlocal context of the understanding the crop knowledge, how it is, what are the practices that is being followed, and how we can give the recommendation based on that. So how do you build that knowledge together? I think that's where the world will move towards in the next 5 years using AI. And when we talk about generative AI, it will actually further also help you in terms of scaling up that particular innovation. The challenge of AI has always been the data availability for you to fine tune your model, make it very hyperlocal and specific. But I think these newer generation solutions that we have, it will actually help us in terms of shortcutting that entire process of getting to the context, increasing your accuracy, and going to the farmers. Because essentially if the accuracies are lower, then the benefit is not there for the farmers, and they will eventually drop taking your service. And that's very important. In fact, in our experience in the previous projects as well, again, coming to Bihar context, we saw that the uptake of the advisory started from year 1 as 40%, year 2 as 68%, and year 3 as 82%. And the second thing is also about the services has to be enabled through an ecosystem. You have the VRPs, the LRPs, the local players who are working at the grassroots level. How do you really enable them and then the farmers together so that the transparent information can be passed to all of them? So I think in the next 5 years, getting the AI also to all the stakeholders which can impact together in transforming will be very, very important as well. The other context would be about precision agriculture at scale. When we are talking about how will AI transform, I think mostly when we talk about context in Asia and Africa, the biggest challenge of climate change is going to happen in this particular region. Food security is always a big challenge that we see across in Africa. So in fact, in a couple of countries that we are seeing in Africa right now, they are having food shortages, and they want to assess what is the food situation right now. So using AI, remote sensing technologies, we can forecast the crops of what's going in, for example, maize in Kenya, because that's the most important crop, so that the policymakers and the government can decide whether they have to import this season or not. In fact, in Kenya, they are also investing in fertilizer subsidies so that they can provide fertilizers to the farmers so that they can use it for growing maize, and eventually the production will grow. But can we also, and actually they also would like to have a correlation about whether the fertilizers have actually improved the yields or not, because if that's not happening, then the entire investment is going on waste. So in the future, we'll be able to see plans that will be build based on forecasts and current systems using AI and large area assessments, as well as at a very hyper local level, you can actually go and help the farmers as well. You will also see ecosystem around, when we talk about seed companies, a lot of our seed companies are are actually doing breeding, and they are also building seed which are very contextualized to that particular location. So how do you really reduce the breeding cycle from 6-8 years that they normally have? Can you reduce it to 4-5 years or maybe lesser than that, so that they can bring the seeds to the market as fast as possible, looking at the conditions that are there? We can also build a very strong, resilient supply chain. Essentially, in developing parts of the world, forecasts about crops are not available unless it hits the market. And there are a couple of crops which will actually get damaged in this particular transition unless the markets are ready to absorb them. So if we can have a clear forecast about these crops, how they are growing, when they'll be harvested, how much volume will come out, then the entire supply chain can be planned about where to put the infrastructure. So for example, if the government is putting up a warehouse, or a private sector is coming and doing that, they'll have exactly the location about where to put and how to use that in a maximum capacity. So these are some of the areas where we see AI to really come across in the production, in the supply chain side of the business as well. But unlocking the other part of also looking at financing, because we are seeing innovative financing happening in this particular space. And we know that the climate is going to be acting as a challenge across the sector. How do you still embed climate challenges in your models and then help you them to bring the finance? Insurance of crops can be also modified depending on the climate risks that are there. So these are some of the areas where we see a lot of action happening on AI in the coming years. And in fact, in the production scenarios, we are also seeing not just the 5-year, we are talking about 20-30 years where couple of organizations are thinking about, will the cropping pattern change completely, whether because of climate change? Northern Europe will have a different weather condition, which will give you 1 or 2 more cropping seasons, and Southern Europe can have the complete change in their crops, right? We are seeing stresses happening in grapes in Spain and those areas, and the grapes are not the same taste that they were earlier. So we'll also see these changes happening in the crop production practices and locations that they will be eventually shifting in the coming years. So I think understanding that in the holistic context, doing a forecasting and supporting the entire ecosystem, AI is going to play a bigger role. And that's what we see happening in the coming times.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that this long-term climate forecasting will be also fortified. And that has, as you say, is going to be really important. We're already seeing, for example, the cocoa production belt around Ivory Coast and Ghana coming under severe stress, and that will change. And so the question will then become, so what do farmers currently producing cocoa, what are they going to do in the future? So Pratik, we've talked about what you're doing at the moment. What about in the future? How do you see the evolution of AI-enabled digital technology for agriculture?
Yeah, so what Kunal talked about, the hyper-personalization or hyper-localization, and I think that is the generative AI, the way it's going forward is like more data or getting more geographical specific information or more practices which are being followed in particular region. And what we are doing right now is like by serving this question answer, we are collecting huge amount of information. And this information actually helping us to better fine tune the models in future. Now that will enable, right now it's a general purpose fine tune model, but later on what we want to do is like have like a different models for like not different adapters for different farmers or different regions. So then we can actually start even doing personalized information. And the second thing is multimodal thing. The multimodal right now we see textual information, the images, the videos, and also like a lot of sense information. Actually going to start kind of creating better comprehension and high level abstraction of the information. Right now, all the models in AI are like mostly like a single model. So either you're doing weather prediction or crop predictions or market price prediction, but like how they are related to each other. Like, can you actually comprehend higher abstraction from that, like how they are related to each other? So ultimately, when you are actually providing this solution to a farmer, like all the information that you are collecting, not just like about the practices, but like the weather, rain, the crop, the diseases, that all can be comprehended together to create like some abstraction. And that is like our goal to actually provide like use the multimodal model to kind of personalize this information for the farmer. And the second thing which I see and which we have actually started seeing is like of finding trends, like something like when you see a lot of questions being asked in particular region, and then you start actually measuring that these are coming for like some particular type of curling leaves or like some kind of place, you can actually start predicting that this particular crop, like infestation is going on, or going to kind of go forward. And because you're dealing with the farmer and collecting information like that, because these are the farmer who are giving you voice input and like in their language is describing something. So we can actually start finding the trends of like some infestation before it's actually become, like spread around, and we can notify the authorities. Something that we can also do by combining multimodals with the price predictions or market insights, because that's also like, one of the biggest challenge we have seen with the farmer income and like related to like the crop failure or like a price increase on the consumer side is basically the whole logistics system, at least in the developing nation, is not as like mature as like it's in developed nation. So the price fluctuations keep happening. So if we know what kind of question being asked by the farmer on a regional level, we can actually start saying like the amount of crop or yield can probably predict that and advise in terms of like, different crop or different seed or something like that. And this is something like we want to go like more predicting on combining more modalities instead of like just creating like a single model AI things. And this is what like particularly I see how we can go forward.
And I asked you earlier, but now I want an answer. Do you see opportunities to involve video or image-based? Because it's one thing having a farmer describe a leaf curl, but it's a whole different thing if you leverage the likes of Plantix or whatever in order to identify it more effectively.
So we are working to add the image models, and we are trying to integrate image model not just as identifying the disease, but actually having a question answer on top of the disease. Basically, you take a picture, it identifies, and then you can actually start a conversation on top of it. And this is something we are working on, so it can go, because once you take a picture and you are not like stopping at the picture and identifying the disease, you are looking for what kind of pesticide can be used for, what kind of natural sustainable way to kind of get rid of the pest, like those kind of questions can come forward, and that kind of conversation we want to continue and want to implement. So it go from taking a picture to going to the solution, and maybe at the end maybe like the going to the particular distributor or shop where they can actually purchase without getting out of this whole question answer.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Because I mean, ultimately we want to get to a situation where it's as easy as possible for smallholder farmers to respond to whatever challenges they're facing. And
just to add one more thing, because when we are personalizing, we also know the farmers like previous questions or like the history of what he's been asking. So if you know his growing pattern or like crop rotation and the pace, then actually this particular answer can be much more personalized than just like giving you the answer from the picture that we have taken. And that is something can become like very personalized, which was Kunal talking about, like hyper local, hyper personal solution for each farmers we can provide.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And what you're describing is a process, and I'm sure Kunal is doing similar things, of sucking up information in order to constantly train the models in order to hyperlocalize and so on. And one of the challenges that we've been working on a little bit in Bihar is looking at soil health, because that isn't something that you can do from remote sensing and so on. So I think that finding ways of incorporating soil health into this analysis is really important as well. So look, we're nearly at time. We have literally 1.5 minutes. So I'm going to ask you each for your ultimate 30-second pearl of wisdom before we close. Pratik, let's start with you.
So for me, AI is enabling something which was not possible before, like going to in the hand of the farmer, where they can actually now become part of the ecosystem and not just something that is happening on the business level, and something they can actually like become like something that can now actually start comprehending them, instead of like just like giving advisory without like exploring things. And this is something which I see like the new wave of generative AI can enable them to become partners in the whole developing ecosystem.
Perfect. Kunal, your 30-second pearl of wisdom.
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, I think every institution should embrace AI and the power of AI in transforming the way they are doing business in agriculture. It could be from the government, public sector, to development institutions, to private sectors, to banks, insurance, and all of them. This is the way forward. And especially if they can leverage these solutions, they can take these services to the smallholder farmers, which is much needed leading services. And when you're working with the smaller farmers, it's all about how do you hyper-local your services to them, contextualize that to the need of the farmer, and then serve them in the best way possible. Technology, digital, and AI is a way forward for serving that particular need. And when we're talking about 540 million farmers globally, there's no other way than using technology and AI. So we are looking forward to the next future of AI and solving these problems.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both very, very much. And I would exhort everyone to join the Climate Resilient Agriculture Virtual Breakfast Club that you can find on LinkedIn. And we run webinars on a monthly basis. And we look forward to solving this problem. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye now.